ministry's tendency is to get your heart to close. Okay. Like you can be hurt so bad, you can be rejected, you can try things so many times and they not work, or you prayed, and so your tendency is your heart to shrink and to close, and so you don't want people close. You don't want to show people your weakness. You're going to armor up. You're going to protect yourself at all costs, because the tendency, the drift is to go close. What I'm telling you is counterintuitive. It's not natural. It's freeing. I will tell you, it's liberating, but the tendency is to close and to protect. And I think, like someone said, preachers love crowds. They hate people. Right? Like we love crowd ministry. We just don't want individual ministry. I understand that your heart can close because you can get hurt. And the enemy, if he can do anything, he wants to wound you, and he wants to give you a reason why you shouldn't risk, or you shouldn't be open and loving and truthful.
Welcome, everyone. Today we are excited to have Tim Zuniga back on the podcast to talk to us about leadership. He is the pastor of Goodlettsville Pentecostal Church just outside Nashville, Tennessee, and is a great resource when it comes to the local church. In this episode, we discussed a session he taught at the Urshan College Leadership Conference about leading in a post-pandemic world. We look at the roles that vulnerability and value should play in every leader. Well, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today, Brother Zuniga.
Yeah, Greg, just great to be back. Certainly enjoyed our last time we got together, and looking forward to our conversation today.
So excited to have you back on. For those who may not have heard the first episode that we had with you, that was episode 32. So I'll point you guys back there to hear Brother Zuniga's story. He gave some great advice, and just one of my favorite episodes that I've been able to record on the podcast. If you can believe it, we're up to the 90s now, Brother Zuniga. You're with us back in the 30s, back when we were just getting started.
Wow.
And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, last time you were on, we did audio only, and this time we've made you hop on video as well. So it's great to have you on.
Yeah, just super excited. I love to see just what you're doing, and it just exploding and growing. I'm happy for your success.
Well, earlier this year, I think it was this year, or maybe it was towards the end of last year, I think the actual episode that I caught was uploaded to the Urshan College, their podcast. It was uploaded at the beginning of this year, but I think it may have been last year where you spoke at their leadership conference, Urshan College's leadership conference, and you spoke on this subject of leading in the post-pandemic, and it was a great session, and I'll make sure to link it in the show notes of this episode. So I wanted to have you to come back onto the podcast to talk about some of the things that you addressed there. But before we get into that, would you mind providing a little bit of your leadership background, just for those who may not have heard the previous episode we had together?
Yeah, leadership, again, it's a journey. You develop, you grow, and I guess for me, just years ago, even in my teens, I just never knew how to describe it. Really, never knew exactly what it was, but just never could quit and deny the fact that there was something in me that just really just desired this understanding of leadership. And so I can just journey this way back. I think really where it just began to click for me is someone gave a verse in Romans that said something like this, like, if you have the gift of leadership, I think in the King James rule, but if you have the gift of leadership, do it with all diligence. And man, that just sank deep in my heart. Like, okay, man, if God's calling you to do this, and lead, and again, I've not always been a pastor. I've served in so many different roles, and served on staff, and served different churches, and been a part of other teams. And so it's not just a title, it's a heart, it's a desire to make a difference. But really, I think that verse is an anchor verse for me. Like, if you have the gift of leadership, if you're called to lead, do it with all diligence. And for me now, again, just the church and being what it is in the world and how important that is, we need fantastic leaders. We really do. We need God appointed, God called, serious minded, those that dare to believe and dream, and leaders that are fantastic. And so for me, I can just trace it all back and just different roles, different titles, youth pastors, all those different things. But currently I'm a pastor, been pastoring almost 20 years, and this is my first, and I hope pray my only pastorate. I've learned a lot on the journey, a lot of fails, a lot of things that I wish I could do over. But here's what I can tell you: I'm so thrilled to be in the journey. I'm
Mm.
so still so passionate about leading a local congregation, and just I can't deny it. That's something that really revs really hot in my spirit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, who are some of the biggest influences on you when it comes to your view on leadership?
Yeah. My pastor probably would be the first and probably the one that initiated that. As I look back, there's no question his influence in my life is indelible. His thumbprints are all over my life, and I'm so grateful. If you have a great pastor, a spiritual leader in your life, that's a gift. And I've
Mm.
been gifted with such a great pastor, without question. Brother Haney, Bishop Haney would be one that just really influenced me in my formative years of leadership development, vision. He definitely has a mark on me. There's a man that I followed, Ray Carson. Many may not know him, but he's the man that pastored in this congregation for 35 years. I still learn from him. He
Mm.
he was an amazing man, great Christian. I call him a pastor of pastors. He was all in. He was the real deal, and certainly so grateful for him. But there's some mentors and some people that develop you that they don't know you. you
Yeah.
you seek them out, but you know them and you follow them. You let them teach you, and so without there would be some familiar names like John Maxwell. No question, he has had a profound impact on leadership development. Another name, Bill Hybels would be another one. Probably currently, people like Carrie Newhoff, just really just kind of adding to the conversation. But I'm grateful for all those that have played a part in my development. And all those, Sister Nona Freeman, great
Mm.
missionary of yesteryear. Man, she influenced my heart for souls, lost people. Just I
Wow.
could remember the day her her prayer for me just shifted my life, my heart, and I'll never be the same because of that. So it's like there are people that play a crucial role in your life, and when you look back, you're so grateful for them. I'm grateful for my leadership journey. I'm grateful for those people that have blessed me, influenced me, shaped me. I owe a debt of gratitude to them.
Yeah. And are you currently working on any books? So then I can share that with the masses, and we can
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
you're
we can get you writing on leadership. You
God.
teach it very well, but I would love to actually read some of it, take it with me, and share it with
You're
others.
poking the bear. I'll be again. I've never said this, so again, I don't know if this is the place that, but there is this. If you
No
look at
one, no
my,
one
there,
listens.
no, yeah,
You
please,
know.
yeah, no one's going to hear this, but there's about that idea that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Mm.
After great men and women are gone, what remains is what they left in writing. That has shaped generations and societies. And so there's something in me that is beginning to say, not that I think, and please believe me when I don't think I can add to the conversation. I just want to be a steward of what God's put in me. If
Hmm.
it never gets read, if it never does anything, it's not like I have this ambition to be a super writer. I just want to get what's in my heart
Yeah.
and get it out on paper. And so part of that is just being a steward. Whatever happens to that's up to God and whatever. But
Mm.
I certainly don't think I'm a writer. I certainly don't think that that's part of my gift set. But there is something I got to admit that's just kind of lean into that.
Yeah.
There's something there that I need to really buckle down on.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can get something out, and then I can drag you back on here, and we could
You're
talk
too
about it once
kind.
it's out.
You're way too kind.
Well, the subject that you covered at the leadership conference, we'll dive into that.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, you're talking about leading in a post-pandemic world. Now, I really don't want to talk about the pandemic. We could touch on it
I'm
a
with
little
you.
bit if we want to.
No,
But
no, I'm good.
I'm sick
we're
of
done.
it.
Yeah.
But I thought the principles that you actually shared on were timeless. They did apply directly to life after the pandemic, but I mean they could also apply to other times in life. And so you talked about the V's of leadership, and I'd like to focus on two of them. You mentioned three, So I'll say all three, but the two that I really want us to focus on today. So the three were vulnerability, value, and victory, right? Or victorious?
Yeah. No,
Victory, right. But the two that I want to focus on today for the most of our time is vulnerability and value. I thought what you had to share on those two subjects were really good and different to what you normally hear when talking about the subject of leadership. And one of the things you talked about was the false perception that church leaders are perfect. And myself being a leader within the church, I can vouch for that statement, that we aren't perfect. And so because we aren't perfect, you talked about the importance of vulnerability. Would you mind unpacking that for us? Why is vulnerability so important?
Yeah, I just doing a deep dive, and really, I realized that there's a lot of pressure in ministry, and one of those is that you have to be flawless, pristine.
Mhm.
There's a polishedness about you. Is that a word?
Yeah.
Where you can't show any weaknesses, no chinks in the armor. There's no chips in the cup. It's this always on, 24/7. You do it right all the time, and yet I've lived and led long enough, and I've been around enough great leaders to know that, man, in every leader, if they're really honest, they recognize there's a brokenness about them, and what happens is that we can't even talk about it. It's like there's no room for flaws. There's no room for weakness. There's no room for defects. And so you compound that with the pressures that I have to deliver top-notch sermons or top-notch, leadership all the time. I've
Mm.
got to have some great message that makes people go, wow. And man, the competition out there is above our heads. We're playing in the deep end, and so there's no win. You can paddle as fast as you want to, but you're never going to get to where you think you want to go because there's just no win. And you compound that with just life, raising a
Mm.
family, having a marriage that's loving, life-giving, hope-filled, and then ministry, and then it's like you're pulled in all these different directions. And when that reality sets in, you begin to crumble inside, but you can't share that. Who do you say that to? Like, who do you tell? Like, I'm really struggling here. I'm in a dark night of the soul. I need help. We just never have let the platform be where that can be honest, and we can say that without retribution, without feeling like, okay, I'm backslidden, or you need to get out of the game. And so what happens is that we start, just digesting all of this issues, pain, pressure, and we get wounded. I heard somebody recently talk about, we're really good at ministering out of our wounds.
Mm.
We're hurt, and so, man, we just begin to really push and operate out of. We can be mean, we can be crass, we can be hurtful, we can do things uh, because we're not whole, we're not well, and so it just. I just want to have the conversation. I know it has to be some wisdom in that.
Yeah.
You don't just go vomit on anybody and just throw up on anybody. And again, there's some wisdom. There's some ways to do that, I think, that are helpful. But the truth is, God never asked us to be perfect.
Right.
He never asked us that. So where's that in the Bible, where He asks you, once you receive your calling, you're done with sin, you're done with temptation, you're done with the flesh, you're done with
Mm.
struggles. That's just not there. And so, I do think that God asked us to be honest, though.
Yeah, he
He asked
does.
us just to be honest. And so, I just think there's a lot of pain, and that's not mean you're debilitating or you're less than or you're not enough or you're really never going to do it. But what happens is we start leading unhealthy. What I like to call is like deceptively unhealthy.
Mm.
Because a lot of us are good enough where we can fake it. A lot of us can play the game, go through the motions, and you've seen it. Like, I've heard stories of great men of God preach like these amazing conferences, and there's sin in their life. It comes out later.
Yeah.
There's known issues in their life, and like, why didn't we see that? Why didn't we hear that? Why didn't we feel that? Why didn't we know that? And yet the reality is, you can get so good at your giftedness, you rely on your experiences so much that you know how to manage through it, and
Mm.
yet falling apart on the inside. And so, to me, I'm not a therapist. I'm a leader, and I care deeply that we lead healthy. I think healthy churches stem from healthy leaders, and so to manage that is just so important to me, to be vulnerable and just walk that process.
And you talked about it a little bit there. You talked about how in our vulnerability,
Yeah.
we can't just dump on everybody the struggles that we're facing or so on and so forth. But there's a way where it can be shared appropriately. Our weaknesses, our failures can be shared appropriately.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I've tried to do some thinking and listen to other great leaders, and so a lot of it I've learned or learning from others as well. Wayne Cadera will say, we share things on the victory side of things. Okay, like I can be vulnerable, but I'm going to share that on the victory side, and there's a truth to that. What happens when you're in the middle of it, though? What,
Mm,
like you're going through that dark night of the soul. You're fighting struggles, temptation, whatever that may be, and again, it hits different people different ways. Is there people that you can talk to? I've had conversations of people saying I have accountability partners, but you're not honest with your accountability partner. And I know questions invoke healthy conversations, and I'm not saying that every accountability relationship is dysfunctional, but what I do know that there are really some things that you can share that help. And so I'll give you a couple examples. Like really it started with me when I heard like John Maxwell. So he's like in his 40s, and man, he is as busy. He's writing, he's famous around the world, and he's sharing. He pulls back the curtain a little bit, and he shares a moment where he's about to leave on the trip, and he tells his wife, he says, I'm really battling lust. He said, I just want you to know that. I want you to pray for me.
mm,
And I need you to help me with that. And so, man, when he said that, it's like, you're not supposed to say things like that. You're not supposed to call it out. That's not proper. You got to get trained up better. But man, I'm telling you, everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of those that heard, man, they just felt a life coming. They,
mm,
they felt like, okay, you mean I'm not the only one?
yeah.
You mean you battled those too? You mean and so just that reality. For me personally, I've had to kind of push away some things because of maybe some apps or some social media because of where I felt the drift was taking me,
Mm,
and felt uncomfortable and said, okay, it's not the road I want to walk on. I'm getting more comfortable saying this when I get the privilege of talking to leaders and just try to be honest. I'm not a we're all fighting the good fight of faith, right?
right.
None of us have this whip. And but man, I'm getting really, really good or more comfortable. Let me say it that way. I'm getting way more comfortable saying, I'm a broken man.
Mm,
I mean, I want to lead at a high level. I want to please God. I want to hear well done, not just one day. I want to hear well done today, But
yeah.
man, I'm telling you, I'm a broken. I know my failures. I know where I should be. I know the things that the enemy comes at get me, and so, I don't say that to look for great. I say that to help those that are hearing. You're okay. It's okay. It's okay to be tempted. Temptation is not a sin. When you give into temptation, that's the sin. It's okay to admit, like, man, I'm battling fears or doubt or lust. That I'm battling. Like I want you to realize it's okay. You're not the only one. There's others that do it. It doesn't make you less. It doesn't make you less called of God. It doesn't make what you do any less significant. I think when we share things like that, when I've been honest, there's just like tears start rolling down people's cheeks.
Mm,
There's an openness. Like
yeah.
I really get that. I understand that. Just going a little bit deeper for me, like Sunday, we had a fantastic missionary, Brother McFarland from Ireland. He's preaching a message. Just encourage people to listen to it. It's about just finding an altar. It's talking about altars, and he's talking in ways that I've just so eye opening. He's talking about altars, like we, the altars are looking for a sacrifice. The Bible says you're baptized with the Holy Ghost and fire. Have you ever wondered what the fire is for?
Yeah.
The fire is looking for a sacrifice, right?
Mm,
And I'm telling you, in that moment, I felt God just said, Zuniga, you don't have a sacrifice on the altar.
mm,
And I just like, oh God, like let the light of truth, boom, just in my heart. And just, like, okay, God, I'm missing it somewhere. I'm missing it. We So, I got to wrestle with that. I don't have an answer for that. I wish I could tell you, yeah, and these are the 3 steps I did, and now I have this great sacrifice on the altar.
Right.
It's going to be on my knees and my face before God. Said, God, you gotta clean me up. You gotta help me get this better. Our life is a living sacrifice. That's what we do. That's what we're called to do. It's not a one-time, I sacrifice. A life that is with open hands. That God, whatever you put in these is yours. And so, that's what I'm talking about. Just like I don't have it all together. I'm fighting this too, trying to keep it between the lanes and out of the ditch. And yet I want a revival church.
Yeah.
I want to minister in ways that transform lives and bring answers. And so, it's I say this too, just to kind of help. I think we impress with our strengths,
Yeah.
but we really connect with people with our weaknesses.
Yeah.
Like
agree.
when I'm just sharing with you, any room that I'm in, if there's truth-loving people, they lean in.
Mm-hmm.
They get it. There's no pretense. There's no hard sell. They understand. There's many times there's just the Holy Ghost sweeps in those rooms, and man, there's people just crying out to God for strength, for clarity, for direction, for healing. There's so many leaders that need to be healed, and so you have to dig deep sometime.
Well, I think that openness, when you share that openness as a leader, when you are vulnerable and someone that a lot of people look up to and value their leadership, when you're vulnerable like that, it's almost like a pressure is released. We've all put this pressure on ourselves that we have to be perfect, that we have to maintain a certain level. And when someone is vulnerable and says, hey, I'm dealing with something as well, as you just said, talking about sacrifice. And it's so important. I wanted to highlight this when you were talking about we're very good at being vulnerable on the victory side. Yeah. So once it's finished, once we've gone through the season, and then now we have something that we can share as a result of that season, we're very good at being vulnerable then because I'm already successful. I've already moved on. I'm going forward. But providing that vulnerability in the midst of a trial or in the midst of a season, it's just, to me, that was a revelation what you shared there, because thinking back to it, it is true. Often when we are vulnerable, it's after the fact. It's not in the middle of the journey.
What I'm learning too, Greg, is that sometimes the most helpful thing we give people is a dilemma without an answer, a problem without a solution. Like, I don't know what to do. I haven't figured this out yet, but by the grace of God, I'm going to figure this out. Like that to me really opens up people. Like, we're so used to bringing the solution with the problem, and I understand the value of that. There's a true principle in that, but I think there's also a truth that this is still a story that's unfolding. This is still, and I'm going to win.
Yeah.
I just don't have it all pretty packaged up yet. I think leaving some things unanswered, undone, is just as helpful sometimes.
Yeah, and you talked about in the session, you were talking about how vulnerability is actually attractive as a leader, and that seems almost counterintuitive. It's like, why would me being vulnerable be attractive to others? Aren't I supposed to be the superstar, the superhero, the person that everyone's supposed to look up to? Why is that attractive?
Well, because I think that's just, being real. I think people want real. I think there's a statement that says something like, people would rather follow someone that's real than someone that's always right. Again, you just being real. People are not repelled from your realness. I think they're endeared to you. They understand their own challenges and their own struggle. And so I think, to me, that just, lets people see you in a light that they can identify with, that they can associate with, that they get at that. They understand that in a deep way, in a real sense. But I understand also that ministry's tendency is to get your heart to close. Okay. Like, you can be hurt so bad, you can be rejected, you can try things so many times and they not work, or, you prayed. And so your tendency is your heart to shrink and to close. And so you don't want people close. You don't want to show people your weakness. You're going to armor up. You're going to protect yourself at all costs, because the tendency, the drift is to go close. What I'm telling you is counterintuitive. It's not natural. It's freeing. I will tell you, it's liberating, but the tendency is to close and to protect. And I think, like someone said, preachers love crowds. They hate people. Right? Like we love crowd ministry. We just don't want individual ministry.
Mm.
I understand that your heart can close because you can get hurt, and the enemy, if he can do anything, he wants to wound you, and he wants to give you a reason why you shouldn't risk, or you shouldn't be open and loving and truthful. And so, there is a true device there. Like I bring this up in the lesson, and I'll bring it up now. Paul writes something in Romans 7 that you and I would never write. Like, you would never write this about yourself. I would never write this about yourself. But yet Paul puts it out there for all of eternity. And it's famous words we all know. But man, when you think about it, would you write this? Like, would I write this? Would I say these words? I mean, think of these words. Okay, so I think it's Romans 7:19. He said, "For the good that I would, I do not. But the evil which I would not," the evil. Think of that. He didn't call it sin. The evil that I don't want to do, that's what I do. Verse 20. "Now, if I do that, I would not. It is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me." Notice dwelleth. Like you mean that's not a done deal? That's not. No.
No, it's present.
It's dwell. It's a continual process. Like, would you write that? Like, I'm fighting sin every day. Evil in me, I'm fighting that every day. That, to me, that's vulnerability right there in Scripture. That I just look at that verse with new lens. I'm like, man, let every word sink deep. Like, I want to do good. I don't do that. Like, I really want to go help people. I want to go reach people. I want to go start I want to do all of these. And I don't do that. And we look at all the things that Paul did do. Okay, think about that. But he would tell you, there's so much undone that I never did. But the evil, which I hope I would never do, I did that more than I wanted to. It's almost scary when you think of that. Now, again, I want to be clear. Paul would be the same one. Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? I think Paul is being vulnerable here for a purpose. He's wanting us. Leadership is hard stuff. It's not just accomplishments. There's an inside game that you got to manage as well. This flesh, this heart, this inside man that needs to live and thrive and be healthy. So to me, I just think just making sure that we're inside is stronger than our outside.
Yeah, and that's powerful from the Apostle Paul, and it still rings true, centuries later.
Yeah.
But imagine how powerful it is when a person that is as vulnerable as the Apostle Paul was there. Like, sometimes we allow Scripture to be the only thing that preaches a message, but we can preach a message as well through our own life. And I think that's what you're really getting at here when you're talking about the importance of being vulnerable. Yeah. There was a couple exercises that you talked about. I wanted to make sure that it gets shared here because I thought they were brilliant. So you shared these exercises in that session. Would you mind sharing them with the listeners of the podcast, and they could possibly do them as well for themselves? Yeah,
it's a tool, and just to give credit where credit is due, is a tool that I learned at Global Leadership Summit years ago. That really became something that I put in my tool chest as a leader, because we work with people, and honestly, we don't know how they're doing. Like, they can be functioning, they can be getting their job done, they could be doing what they're called to do and what their roles are, but you don't really know. Like, are they pulling their hair out? Are they like on the about to lose it? Are they in a good place? Are they healthy? And we don't know as leaders. You again, unless we're operating the gifts, you really don't know where leaders are. Okay, you don't know. And so I did this exercise, and I already gave credit where I got it from, but it really deals with 3 areas. And if I whiteboard this out, so I draw it out. But just imagine a line, straight down line, a line that just think of it. That's the inside guy. Okay, that's the inside guy. And so that you would draw a line at your knees, you would draw a line at your heart. Okay. And so there's three components to there. And so, the idea is below your knees would represent, UC, which means under challenge. Like, uh, you're doing what you're called to do. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Everything's being done, but you're bored out of your mind. You wish you had a better challenge. You wish somebody would tap into your passion. You wish somebody would ask you, what you really would like to do. You're doing the job that they asked you to do, but you're really not challenged. You have something to give. You have time to give. You're under challenge. You're actually getting bored. Okay. The middle section would be represent adequately challenged. Now, with any of these, there's a range. Okay, so there's a range, but adequately challenged means, good, things are well. I'm doing what I'm asked to do. I'm balancing and really in rhythm with my life responsibilities, those that are around me. Nobody's calling the cops. I mean, we're all good. Things are well. I'm adequately challenged. There's a good pace in my life. There's a good. I've got joy. I've got excitement still. There's a enthusiasm about what I'm doing. I still love it. I'm in the game. I'm thankful. You're just adequately challenged, right? You got to run hard. Things are again they're counting on you to deliver, but you're adequately challenged. Okay. Well, the top end would be dangerously over challenged.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, no one knows this, but man, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Like if I do one more thing, I'm done. Like I'm so stressed out. I'm taking medication to go to sleep at night. Like I feel so dry inside. I'm so lost. I'm still doing my role. I'm still doing but I'm if you really knew, it'd be scary. Okay, that's dangerously over challenged. Now, in a real sense, and a lot of studies have been given to this. Like, when do we maximize our potential? Like, when do we pull the best out of ourselves? Where's that area that just calls the best out of what we're delivering? It demands, and man, it's just again, where is that? So to be clear, and this is a lot of research and a lot of data and a lot of social scientists, a lot of all of those things. But honestly, that range is right in the beginning, the threshold of the dangerously over challenged section. Like right out of the adequately challenged, stepping right over that line and into the dangerously over challenged. It's at that very area right there is when we produce the best of us, where we're running at our best speed, we're delivering our best product, we're coming through with our finest, things. We can't live there long term, but it's really where a lot, again, there's enough pressure, there's enough deadlines I got to meet, there's enough people waiting on me that I'm pushing hard. I know this is not sustainable for the long term, but man, am I delivering great results. Okay, so that's it. So with that understanding, I ask people, where are you? Like, I could be in a room with pastors and leaders. I could be at a church with their staff, and normally I'll ask for a volunteer. I said, can you just help me? I'll usually go first to give an example, like, hey, this is where I feel like I am. So if I was doing it now, I would say, where are you, Zuniga? Where are you now? I think I'm on the top end of the adequately challenged. I don't think I've stepped through the threshold of the dangerously, over challenged. I feel like there's a lot of things moving in my life, a lot of responsibility, but we're delivering. I feel good. I've put in practice some things that are keeping me sustainable, that are keeping me healthy, at a good rhythm. So I feel like that's where I'm at. Okay. So I'll have a pen. I'll hand that to somebody, and you would be amazed what has happened and transpired. I give you stories where somebody comes up there, and as soon as they put a mark in the dangerously over challenge area, they just begin to cry.
Wow.
And their whole team just looks at them like, we didn't know that. Like, you are such a fantastic leader. You deliver. We can count on you. You're so steadfast. We had no idea. You give the pen to somebody else, and they said, I love what I'm doing, but they put their mark on under challenged. Like, I don't think I'm being tapped out. I don't think I'm being asked to do my best work. You don't know.
Yeah.
I've recently just, with some leaders in our own local congregation, I just slide the piece of paper across the desk and say, tell me where you are. I don't know where you are. I don't know. Everything could be rosy and everything great in your family and your marriage and your kids and your health and your mind and your soul, your money. Everything's great. You could be fantastic, be living on cloud nine. You could be drowning
Mm.
You're gasping for air. I don't know. Would you be kind to me and let me know
Yeah.
where you are? It's eye opening to me.
And we're good at portraying all three phases the same. We could present the same front and be in one of the three different phases. There was another one that you mentioned on the in the session, and I really liked it. You were talking about I think it involved 10 contacts, sending a
Oh yeah.
text message out to 10 contacts. But I like how you finished it. So you talked about how like ask them. You explained it. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Okay. It's so ironic. So I was with a young leader today that's transitioning, and I use this very example. So this is so fun. So the idea, and that this comes from the CEO of AT&T when he's giving really just a company wide kind of vision casting, and he's talking about being good people, right? I mean, good souled people, truth loving, like as best the world can in the business setting. You're trying to say it's not what we just do. We want to be solid individuals. We want good families, good lives, and so it's in that context. And so he said, there's words that matter that I think over every month, and words like courage and be brave and be kind, and these words are guiding lights. And he said the way that I come to these words is that I sent out a text to 10 people that know me, that are close to me, friends of mine, people that know me more than just, casually. We're more than acquaintance, we're friends. And I asked them to send me just one word back that described me to them. Like if you were to describe me, what one word would you use? And so, we get all these words in. And he said, when I got all the words in, he said, what came to me was what's not there.
Yeah.
Like these are the people that know you best. These are the people that are closest to you. They know your breath stinks. They know, but like what's not on that list? He said from that moment on, I began to create the list to make sure that what I want my life to be, that I actually start focusing on those. So let's just say, the word that I've been, God, I want to be brave. I doesn't mean going killing a dragon. God, where can I be brave today? What one thing that I could do that would be a brave act? It may be being kind. It may be asking for forgiveness. That word, if you just think about it, like where have I been brave lately? What God, where do I need to be brave? Where are you asking me to be brave? Whether it's a commitment, whether it's a sacrifice. For me, God, whenever that sacrifice on that altar, help me to be brave. Help me to be brave in that moment, God. I just a word. Maybe it's kindness. Maybe it's, am I really kind? Do I really treat people the way? Do I really treat those that are closest to me right? Like, am I kind? Or do I just think I'm kind because I'm altruistic and, I just have flowery thoughts of myself, but those that live with me, can't stand me. Like those words. So I told this young leader, and I think this is the exercise is, text 10 people, ask them to give you one word that describes you. And then ask yourself the real hard question, what's not there?
Yeah.
And what do you want to be there? To me, that's really eye opening.
Yeah. That's amazing. That insight. What's not there?
What's not there?
What is it that people are perceiving from you, but you may think is there, but they're not seeing it, and it's important that they do see it. That's so good, and I would encourage everyone to do that. Hopefully, not the same person is getting like 100 text messages, but it'd be good if we did this exercise. So that covers vulnerability. I wanted to finish off the episode talking about the second V that you referenced, which was value, and and you took a broad look at society as a whole, and then you narrowed it in on the individual. And so I want to ask you this question: how does the current state of our society affect us when it comes to ministry and bringing value to people's lives?
That again, it's a really great question. It's a broad question. I don't know if I fully can give you, the full answer. Meaning, I'm because I realize the world's complex.
Right.
I realize the world's unraveling, so to speak. There's a lot of issues at stake. Whether it's morality issues, political issues, racial issues, economic issues, educational. I mean, the list goes on and on. there's just seems no end in sight. And so as a people of God, I think what we do, it matters. And so wherever we are, like wherever God's called you, wherever your job is, if you're in construction, if you're a teacher, if you work in the hospital, education field, if you're in law enforcement, whatever, military, it doesn't matter. Professional sports, wherever you are, that you are responsible for being a light, that you can share goodwill. And when people see genuine love and kindness, they can't deny that. There's something in the way that we are wired as humanity, that we recognize genuine kindness and care. And when they see that lived out, I think that becomes a light in a very, very dark world. I think that becomes attractional. I think that becomes something that they can't deny. It's not that we're preaching to them. It's not that we're condemning their sin. It's like, you know what? We recognize that in these kind of opportunities, kind of areas that we're living in, we can condemn, we can throw fire, and I'm with you. I get there needs to be righteousness. I get that we need to have great teaching. I get that we need to be clear on what is acceptable, what is not. I know the water's getting muddy and murky. I get all that, but in our actions and in our way that we position ourselves, I think being kind and true and truth loving and humble and allowing the Holy Ghost to lead and direct us, I think that's the answer for the world. I think that's how the churches thrive. I think churches that buy into that idea are going to make an impact on their community like they've never seen possible, because the world is full of hate.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. They're angry. People are so angry at life, at jobs, at family. Dysfunction is the normal. That's what they know. They just know it's shoot or die. I mean, it really is going to, this world is crumbling. It's caving in on themselves. They need a breath of air, a fresh breath of truth, of love, of kindness, of genuine concern and care about people. I pray that. I ask God in every interaction, Lord, let me bring value. Let me bring value to that person, because they are valuable to you. They're broken. They're not in line with your word. They're scars. They're banged up. We may never have more than this one interaction, but I want to be kind, and I want to add value to them. I want to do my part, what I can.
Yeah, and especially in 2022, 2023, going forward, that is the differentiating factor between the church and society at large. And I mean, it's always been the differentiating factor. The fruit of the Spirit, showing love and kindness, and like genuinely loving people. I had the youth president of Ontario, Brother Amani Nagama, on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about, he's actually, he was the first person I had on the podcast who's from Generation Z. And he's only 21 years old, but God is using him in a powerful way. Yeah, and he's the leader of his district in Canada. And he was talking about that with Generation Z, that, just to get in an environment where people love them for them, to get around people that are kind to them, just to be kind to them, not trying to get anything out of them, not trying to, do anything beyond showing genuine kindness, showing genuine love. He was saying, that's a huge factor right now with Generation Z, because they're not used to experiencing that in everyday life.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And I say this again, another conversation I had today with a fantastic leader. And this is, I said, you know what you and your wife need to pray? Pray this. Pray that God baptizes you with the love for people. Like, again, I know that sounds real sloppy agape, right? Really? Yeah. But I'm just telling you, the scripture says it like this: let the love of God be shed abroad in your hearts. Like, let it run over. Let it begin to touch every area. Ministry is challenging, difficult, at some level impossible to do without a deep love for people. Again, without a true, genuine, and you can only love them with the love of God. You can't love them with a human love, because that's an exchange. You do the right things, I'm going to love you. But you mess up, and then I'm going to kick you out. God's love is pure, and it has no attachments.
Right.
And I've been praying myself, God, give me a genuine love for people. Like, every time that I look them in the eye, they know, you know what, man, God loves you. God's not done with you. God, it's not over. This, whatever you're facing, is trying to get you back into relationship with God, and I want to facilitate that.
Mhm.
I think every one of us, every one of your listeners, to say, God, I'm not doing this because I'm good or gifted or skilled. I want to do this with a healthy dose of the love of God, just oozing out of what I do.
Mm. So good. You made this profound statement, at least what I thought was profound, in the teaching. You said, I don't want to just preach what is true, but I want to preach, what I want to preach is something that is helpful and true.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just preach truth, but I want to preach something that is helpful and true. What do you mean by that?
I have this thought in my mind that every Sunday and every time I preach, there are people there that come in. They don't say this with their words, but they say this with their eyes. They're saying, Pastor, preach to me, scare me, make me laugh, humble me, move me, motivate me, inspire me. But whatever you do, don't let me leave here the same way. They're begging for something to take place in that service that transcends their issue, their emotional state, the problems or the battles or the issues at hand. They're looking at me and say, whatever you do, move me, shake me, scare me, help me, do whatever, but please, whatever you do, please don't let me leave the same way. And that is a strong motivator for me. And so I've been really trying to not set up easy targets. Like, we can get a good thought and we'll say something like that'll preach, right?
Yeah.
That's a powerful, but doesn't mean it's helpful. Okay. And again, a lot of times it is, I understand that, but doesn't mean it's helpful. I want to help where people are, again, totally led of the Spirit, totally. I think in every service you can bring deep biblical insight. Again, that's the only eternal part of your whole message. Your words, ideas, stories, thoughts, facts, antidotes are not eternal. Okay. Those are just added to, but the word of God's eternal. And so again, we preach the word of God, and I know that works, but there's a way to convey it and teach it and preach it where it draws people in. And you can hit people with hard truth if you do it in the right way, in the spirit that is in a receiving spirit, or a spirit that invites them. And so I have this mindset, like, I don't want to set up easy straw men to easily blow over or easy or knock down. I want to set up steel men that are a challenge to knock down. I want to address things that are deep and meaningful and true. That there are single moms there that don't know how they're going to make it. There's a couple that, they haven't had sex in 6 months and they're struggling. And there's an older couple wondering, how long they have to still live together. There's a teenager that's battling for their own, do I believe this? Is this who and that's in every service. And I want to go and say, God, how do I reach them all? How do I minister to all of that? Only God in His Spirit can do that. He can touch the hardest, callous spirit and the most sensitive soul in the building and online. He can do that. And when you're a vessel that says, God, I'm going to bring the very best. And what I call it is, God, I'm going to bring my 2 fishes and 5 loaves. And I just know up front, it's not enough.
Yeah.
I just know, God, it's not enough. It's not going to meet the need. But God, that's all I got. And God, I'm going to give it to you. And if you'll bless it, there won't be a hungry soul in the building. It matters to me that what I've been praying is, God, I want to be an equipper. I really do. I have a saying that, God, I want a heart of a pastor, a mind of a prophet, a spirit of an evangelist. I want those components to dwell deep inside of me, to administer to those lives and those individuals that you have put under my care. And I want them to know when it's all done, I've done everything I can to give you my 2 fishes and 5 loaves. So, that I guess I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it does, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to preach it just because it's true.
Yeah.
I really want it to be helpful.
Yeah, and I think those who have the ability to preach, teach, we should think about that when we're putting a message together. That, hey, is this just preaching a point? Is this just bringing out a biblical concept, which is good? But at the end of the day, is it helpful along with being true? Truth is truth, but we can deliver it in such a way that it it actually helps the individual that is hearing the truth and doesn't cause them to be closed off. We've all heard preachers that preach with vulnerability, openness, and then preachers that preach really hard. And some of us tend to not respond so well to preachers who preach really hard. But I guess there are times where that might be necessary. But the other aspect that you addressed when you were talking about value, you didn't just talk about the value of the congregation, the value of individuals outside the church. Those people are valuable. But you made sure to mention that leaders need to understand their own value. Why is that so important?
Well, it's like you think of Jonah, okay? Like in Jonah, he's the problem. So let's throw Jonah overboard and let's save the ship, right? Jonah's not the problem. Jonah's the answer.
Mm.
Okay. The story is not about Jonah, the book, or the whale. The story is about Nineveh, right? And so, in my mind, I think leaders need to understand you're not the problem. You're the answer. And you need to, again, you can get into the idea where, you can get haughty and cocky and arrogant. I get all that, prideful. Yeah, we battle loads of that. But there's another part that, we need to recognize and honor that God has chosen you, that you bring something to this world. There's not another one of you in all the planet. There's now over 8 billion people, and there's not another one of you. That's a rare find. And by the way, I say that to my children. I tell them that of all the people, God chose you. You know God. God has a plan for your life. You have value. You can be a leader. Not someday, today. You can make a difference. Your kindness. I do think that when we understand how valuable we are, we look at opportunities different. There's something about that brings a confidence and a clarity that you realize you walk with a different way of, not an arrogant, again, I mean this, not prideful. I know we battle that, but with just a humble confidence that, what, God, you want to partner with me today to make a difference. How are you going to use me today? Like, that's a prayer God will answer every day. You want to pray a prayer that God will answer? God, how do you want to use me today? Right? And when you realize that you add value and you're bringing value, I think it just changes the way you look at opportunities. I think it changes the way that you look at life. I think it changes the way that you perceive what God's doing. Just imagine the other way. If you think you're not worthy, think that you're not enough, and think that you don't have the goods, and think that no one wants to hear you, does that not affect the way you lead? Yeah. Does that not affect the way you communicate? Obviously, it does.
Yeah, and you also talk about there's two things that can rob us of our value. So it's important that we see that we are valuable. But you said that there's two things in particular that can rob us of our value. What were those two things?
Yeah, the two things are shame and comparison. And to be clear, I don't think these are original with me. These are just my learning and just trying to understand that what works against us really is the shame. And shame is not, I did bad, is I am bad. Like we call it impression management. Like, we will let you see what we want you to see. But if you ever really saw the real me, you wouldn't like me. Okay, that's shame. That's shame that is constantly fighting through. And it's amazing how many people fight shame. They something of their upbringing, something of their past. Again, whether, just to be honest, I've dealt with people. We've all dealt with people that have had, something that was sexually done to them as a young person, or a young age, and it follows them. And they battle that. There could be some things that they've done themselves that just begin to hang over their heads. I realize it can be crippling. It's debilitating, and it makes you check. I'm not going to try. I'm not going to give. I've prayed that prayer. I've asked God to forgive me, and I'm here. I am again. And so shame keeps you in the corner. Shame will take you out of the game. And so I think that's one thing that works against feeling valuable. And that's why, to me, again, Paul saying, I'm the chiefest of sinners, is huge.
Yeah.
Is huge, because it's not that he got your list of sins and someone else's list of sin and his list of sin and starts doing an analysis on nope, I won here. Yep, I trumped all of you guys. I got all the worst sins. No, it's the fact that when he understood the grace of God in his life.
Yeah.
I'm just the worst sinner among us. So that's one. I think comparison is more natural. Where there's something that we always looking over our shoulder and we compare ourselves among ourselves. And Paul says that's not wise. It's not wise. You don't win at the game of comparison, but you're all in it. We want our ministries to be the best. We want to do the best preaching. We want to be known. We this comparison is just a no-win game. I think maturity helps a lot with this when you
Yeah.
just realize, you know what, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm grateful. I'm going to keep trying hard. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to play big league ball. But I realize, you know what, there's always going to be a out there, bigger, smarter, taller, richer, prettier, right? There's always an out there that's just going to outdo you, and you're never going to win that. I do think those two things really work against us, feeling like we bring worth and value to this.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I know it will be transformational for the listeners. I really do believe that. I believe that the Spirit of God has been working throughout this conversation, and I think it's going to help a lot of people work through issues, become better leaders, become better followers. So I really do appreciate your time and setting that aside and coming on the podcast to talk to us about these really important issues. I like to finish these conversations by giving our guests the opportunity to share a parting word. So if there's anything we haven't touched on or anything you want to add to what we've discussed today, Brother Zuniga, if you could finish off the podcast. Thank you again for your time.
Yeah, Greg, again, honored to be with you. I love you and so grateful for what you're doing. And I just pray God's best upon you and bless your thinking and bless you, God, open doors. And so just honored to be here. And again, I pray that anything I've said encouraged people and then just strengthen their leadership. I care deeply about the local church and local leaders. And so grateful to be a part of that. I think I'm going to come back and close my thoughts with this idea of altars. I guess that's just where I'm at, in a vulnerable place. There's a lot of hard work ahead for Tim Zuniga. And there's part of me, some people say, when I pray, I don't want to hear the voice of God because I'm afraid of what he's going to ask. There's a truth to that. In that message that I was referencing, he said a statement, I think it goes something like this: God will not open a door that is greater than your altar. And I feel like God is ready to do so much more with my life, ministry, and I realize I've come to a crossroad. And this idea that leaders have diminishing altars, our altars are getting smaller in our lives. Just think about that. Just, when's the last time you said yes to God, no matter what? And so my encouragement to every person that's listening is that you would find your altar. You would make sure there's a sacrifice on that altar. And what that may be, a financial sacrifice, that may be a career shift sacrifice. I know it was for me at one point. It may be a relational sacrifice. Like you don't need to be dating that person. You need a friendship sacrifice. Again, I can't say what it is, but man, God will not open a door for you where your altar cannot equal that. And so, if you don't mind, Greg, I'm going to pray. I don't know who will listen, but I'm just going to speak over them. Lord Jesus, I just want to say thank you, God, for this moment. Thank you for Greg, God, his leadership, his influence, it's growing. You've heard every word of our conversation, God, and we're just flesh. We're broken leaders that want to get it right so desperately, but yet we're challenged again. God, this is not a tactical strategy session, God. This is a true humbling ourselves, opening our hearts and say, God, you're calling me. You've chosen me not to fail, not to fumble, not to fake. You've called me, God, to lead well. And God, I know, Lord, there are those that are listening that just need to be reminded, God, that their altars are shrinking, diminishing. So I speak over myself and everyone that's listening, God, that there would be a sacrifice on that altar. And I pray that you would help us discover that, know that. And in that moment when we know, that we would be brave to realize that, God, you will never ask us to do something, God, without knowing what's ahead. So I just speak for the courage to trust you. And bless everyone that's listening. Bless my friend Greg and his family. In Jesus' name.